Hello there and welcome. This is Mikhail or Michael speaking, and as always before the video starts, I want to express my eternal gratitude towards those who decided to support me financially, be it through Patreon, PayPal, or Super Thanks. I really appreciate your generosity, so thank you friends and have a blessed day. Today's video I will start with the Avdiivka settlement and discuss the situation here. In the last few days, Russians became extremely active here on this front, launching an offensive in attempt to once and for all close the Avdiivka cauldron. These Russian attacks came from the settlement of Krasnogorovka in the direction of Ukrainian-controlled Berdichi and Stepove. Russians also attacked from Vodyane and Apitny in the direction of Severnaya and Tonenke, as well as in the direction of the city of Avdiivka itself. Fighting was also reported in Pervomaisky, as Russians yet again attempted a full capture of this settlement. Before this Russian attack ensued, Russian artillery heavily bombarded Avdiivka settlement, a coke plant which Ukrainians are currently using as a fortress, and it is heavily fortified, as well as heavily bombarded all the small villages that stand in the way of the Russians and their goal to fully encircle Avdiivka city. For example, here is a video inside of Avdiivka city, which can be used as a proof that Russians are now currently heavy bombarding the city itself in attempt to destroy as much Ukrainian forces that took refuge in it as possible. Here on this picture taken outside of Avdiivka city, you can see heavy black smoke that basically enveloped the entire city, and it is evident that the city is currently burning. Ukrainians, however, did not sit idle and actively counterattacked Russians. These counterattacks came from settlement of Pervomaisky, Tonenke and Severnaya, as well as from Avdiivka settlement, and in attempt to stop Russian advancements in the direction of Berdichi and Stepove. As a result of offensive operations here in this area to the north of Avdiivka city, Russians were able to advance ever slightly and extend their zone of control around Krasnogorovka. Here on this picture you can see exactly how much territory Russians were able to recover in that assault. Obviously, this is not only to help Russians advance in the direction of Stepove and Berdichi, but also to cross the rail line and initiate the battle for the Avdiivsky coke plant. Its strategic importance should not be overlooked, as, like I said before, Ukrainians heavily fortified this particular area, and if Russians are to successfully capture this coke plant, not only will the bottleneck become much smaller than it is right now, but also Russians will be able to safely launch attacks in the direction of Avdiivka city itself from the flanks and rear. The Russian offensive here in this area just started, so it is pretty safe to assume that Russian gains in this area will continue as days goes by. When it comes to the situation near the Vodyane and Oputne settlements, it is important to note that in the first day of fighting, Russians were less successful here. Their attacks in the direction of Severnaya and Tonenke was unsuccessful. Same could be said about their attempts at expanding their zone of control around the settlement of Apitne and reaching Avdiivka settlement itself. As a result of Ukrainian counterattacks here in this area and general advances that gradually happened in the last few days, Ukrainians were able to recover this much territory from the Russian side. As you can see, even to this day, the settlements of Vodyane and Apitne is still in danger. When it comes to Avdiivka settlement itself, it is hard to overestimate its importance for both Ukrainians and Russians. All throughout last 9 years, this settlement was heavily fortified by the Ukrainians, mostly due to the fact that, as you can see, it is extremely close to the capital of Donetsk People Republic, city of Donetsk. So I would assume you understand how problematic it is for the Russians and was for the Donetsk People Republic to have a massive Ukrainian stronghold basically at a doorstep of your capital. Ever since the war started, Russians continued their operations in attempt to capture this settlement, however, to this day were unsuccessful. Perhaps we are currently witnessing the start of a battle for this settlement, and this time perhaps Russians will finish the job. So next we will be going to the very north, skipping Bakhmut and stopping near the settlement of Makeivka. In the last few days, Russians also became very active on this front, constantly attacking Ukrainian forces, advancing and capturing several Ukrainian strongholds, These attacks generally came from the settlement of Plashanka in the general direction of the Ukrainian-controlled village of Makiivka, and as a result of these successful offensive operations, Russians were able to capture about this much territory from the Ukrainian side. Before we move to the other portions of the front, it is important to note that generally Russians became very active all across this front. More and more assaults are reported by the Russians within the Serebryansky forest, near Dibrova, in the direction of Torske and Yampalivka, as well as you can see in the direction of Makiivka and Nivelske. Here, Ukrainians are constantly counterattacking Russians in attempt to not allow them to advance anywhere on this front. Within the Serebryansky forest and along the Torsky ledge, they are somewhat successful. However, as you can see, they were unable to stop the Russians in their attempt at reaching Makiivka. Slowly but surely, Russians are advancing here in this area, as both sides are engaged in offensive and counter-offensive operations. Heavy artillery duels and counter-battery activities are taking place. For example, here on this video, you can see exactly what I'm talking about. Russian Lancet drone has struck British-built self-propelled artillery piece somewhere near Kremenna front. As you can see, the video is censored because at some point there's infantry presented in the shot, and again for YouTube that's a big no-no. If you want to see raw footage of what I'm talking about, you can always visit my Telegram channel. All the videos that I'm using on my YouTube's video will be there. But if you also want to consider supporting me and watch my videos uncensored, perhaps you should consider joining my Patreon. Thank you for considering it, and let's continue. From here, let's quickly visit Zaporizhzhian front and discuss the situation around Rabotine Verbova settlements. In the last 24 hours, Ukrainians continued their offensive operations here in this area. They assaulted from Novodanilovka and Rabotina in the direction of Russian-controlled villages of Kompany and Nesteryanka. Their assaults also came in the direction of Novoprokopivka. From Rabotina village itself, village of Verbova was yet again a subject of continuous Ukrainian assaults, and same could be said about settlement of Novopokrovka. Due to the fact that despite continuous Ukrainian activity here in this area, and there are no territorial changes to report, all of these assaults were unsuccessful. At night, the settlement of Rabotina was heavily bombarded by Russian aviation. Here you can see that on the video, and Russian artillery usually finishes the job at day. Here on the video that I will also be forced to censor, you can see a small group of Ukrainian soldiers either going to the front or in the middle of rotation. However, they are easily spotted by the Russians, and Russians open fire on those said force lines. Currently, this is the reality of situation, and one of the reasons why in the last week Ukrainians were unable to gain any territories whatsoever. At last, let's move to the Zherebyanki Labova settlement and discuss the situation here. As you know, this is the first place where Ukrainian forces officially backed down and decided not to fight. At some point, most of the Ukrainian forces engaged in battle for Zherebyanki and Lugova were relocated to the Orikhiv sector, and because of that, all throughout last few months, there were rarely any territorial change. However, this became a subject of change as Russians launched a small offensive here in this area, and as a result of that were able to recover some of the positions from the Ukrainian side. Here on this picture, you can see exactly how much territory Russians were able to capture in that successful offensive operation. As you can see, they have fully recaptured this forest, which in this particular situation is very important. It will allow Russians to conceal and concentrate their troops for a further attacks in the direction of Labkova and Pyatikhatki settlements. Whether this is something that is going to happen, or Russians will stop at that and stay still, luring more Ukrainians into a kill zones that are now Labkova and Pyatikhatki settlement is unclear. However, the territorial change here in this area is somewhat surprising. Now, at the very end, I want to quickly show you a video of Russian drone striking Ukrainian airbase near Kryvyi Rih and hitting Su-25 close air support warplane. Here on this video, you can see exactly that happening. This is a fourth time where Ukrainian plane was hit on this particular airfield. For example, a few months ago, Russians already been able to hit MiG-29. This fact alone is causing an uproar in pro-Ukrainian sources as they question their own government officials and military commanders as to why this airfield was not defended whatsoever. In any way, this is the end of the video. I hope it was informative enough and was to your liking. If it was, please consider supporting it with any means you consider necessary. Thank you in advance. As always, humanity calls me to condemn all violence against human beings. Have a good day, and always remember, Russia will be free and great.